In today's edition of the Sports Saga podcast, Keegan and I sit down with Evan Burke, former football coach turned podcast host and motivational speaker, who by the end of this episode leaves us with a very important message that we really should carry with us for the rest of our lives. We hope you enjoy it. Cue the intro.
I'm going to say he's the basement coach of the year.
They're going to get something rolling.
Welcome to the Sports Saga podcast, presented by Aldi's Electric. Hello, everyone, again, and thank you so much for joining us. Brady Kudo with Keegan Hamlet and our guest. I've been waiting a while to talk to this individual right here. Two careers. I mean, that's not many people could say they've worked two careers that are pretty successful at as well. Evan Burke is with us. Evan coached in the NFL. And Evan is now a very successful motivational speaker and podcast host. So, Evan, thanks for joining us. Most importantly, how are you?
I'm doing great today. And Brady, Keegan, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys today.
All right, so let's dive right into this, right? You're a former football coach, and it's not, at least watching it and hearing, watching a lot of these football documentaries, whatever, it's not an easy job. So take us through your coaching journey a little bit, and why you decided to become a coach. What made you, what drew your interest to coaching?
Sure thing. I mean, I think just like anybody that's interested in athletics or follows athletics from an early age, you play. Very few of us are actually good enough or have the skills and the size to actually play in college. I was not one of those individuals. So grew up here in Dallas, Texas. Always was interested in sports. I played football and I wrestled in high school, and I went to school at the University of Colorado just simply to go to school there at the business school. And my first year there, I didn't have any sport for the first time. Basically since I was 6 years old, and just kind of was wanting to be a part of the competitive aspect of sports, and missing the camaraderie of being on a team, and just kind of like wanted to be involved some way. And I actually started coaching youth sports in Boulder, Colorado at the local YMCA. This was like basketball teams, soccer teams, baseball teams. And this eventually led me to coaching my first coaching job, which was coaching fourth grade football through the Boulder Rec Center when I was, I think, 21 years old. Wow. So those were kind of the humble beginnings of my coaching career. Obviously, I was just doing this as I was a student at the university. I wasn't really kind of doing it with anything else in mind other than I just enjoyed it. And it was a fun thing to do on the weekends and one night a week for practice. Well, as I was kind of going through this, I was also, as I mentioned, going through my undergraduate degree and starting to think about, okay, what am I going to do after college? And this was really kind of the first time that I actually was thinking about, okay, well, what does a career in football coaching look like? Because I like the coaching aspect. A lot of my studies were around management in the business school. And so I thought there was just kind of like a natural link between being a coach and the management principles that I was learning. And so this kind of like set me off on my journey. So from fourth grade football, I coached high school in Boulder at a local high school. And after college, I started looking for a job, specifically in college, and was able to write enough letters where one person responded to me and was able to get my foot in the door at SMU, which is a school here in Dallas, Texas, a Division I football school. And this is in 2006. So my first job as a college coach was actually as an operations assistant. It was a volunteer position. I was monitoring study hall. I was doing class checks, mainly passing Chick-fil-A's out to the guys as they got on the bus. All of the glamorous things that you imagine when you kind of like have this idea that you want to be a football coach. But for me, I thought it was the absolute best. I thought it was the coolest thing. I was 22 years old. I was, at the time I was staying in the pool house at my grandma and grandpa's house because I wasn't making any money. And I was literally at the football facility for, 15 hours a day. And I just thought it was the absolute greatest thing. I was basically getting my master's degree in football, just sitting in on meetings, doing all of the jobs that I just kind of like told you about. And my football career just started to kind of like build on top of that experience. Right. And so from an ops volunteer, I started working with the video department and filming practice. And from that, I got my first opportunity to coach on the field. And from coaching on the field on the offensive side of the ball, they then flipped me over onto the defensive side of the ball. And so my time at SMU, I was there for 4 years. I was able to get my master's degree, and I was able to get my master's degree in football in terms of just like kind of like getting my feet wet from somebody who quite honestly had very little knowledge of what it was like to coach at a very high level. And have all of these different experiences basically in every facet of the organization. And so was just like extremely fortunate to be at SMU at that time. If you guys are familiar with kind of like how big time college staffs are built out now, in 2014 and 15, when I was at UCLA, we maybe had 35 guys on staff, on our football staff that officed in our football office. That is a ton of people. And I would say at SMU in 2006, we had 14 or 15 people, right? And that's basically 10 coaches on the field. And that's like 2 GAs, an ops director, and me. And so like what that did at that like particular period of time was, even though I wasn't the smartest, 23-year-old in college football, I was working my butt off, and I was somebody that was incredibly passionate about it, combined with the fact that I was at SMU during this time where there was really not a lot of help and support that they have now. And so I got a chance to work in operations, recruiting, video, offensive staff, defensive staff, doing basically everything that you can imagine under the sun. And so it was just like very fortunate in terms of my first experience as a coach. And from then after SMU, I progressed to working with the Miami Dolphins, a school in West Texas called McMurray University, and then at UCLA. And so in total, I spent 12 years in the NFL and in college football. And that's kind of my semi-long-winded way of explaining how I got my foot in the door and how I kind of like built the foundation for my coaching career.
So you mentioned like earlier in life, you used to play football yourself. How much of that were you able to take away and like maybe like help mentor the players through high school and college?
I'd say very little, to be quite honest with you.
Wow.
I wasn't a stud player. You guys probably can't tell on Zoom. I'm not a very physically intimidating presence, at 5'10", 160 if I'm soaking wet. So, it wasn't anything like people were looking at me and thinking like, oh, wow, what knowledge can I gain from this person? Because I'm sure he was a star athlete wherever he was. I had to kind of earn that. And I had to earn that through the preparation, the dedication. And honestly, when you're part of a team like that, if you're there every day and you're giving it your all, it doesn't matter whether you're on scout team or you're the backup quarterback or you're the ops volunteer assistant that's passing out Chick-fil-A's. Everybody recognizes the people that are there every day. Yes. And the people that are honestly passionate and busting their ass to do their absolute best. Like you can tell, and we can tell this on our teams in corporate America. And you can also tell the guys that are just there kind of like cashing checks and, just kind of getting by. And I think that my attitude of, I had a mantra that I would tell myself, and I would literally, am I dominating or am I just getting by? And so like I had this dominate today attitude about everything I did. And so even though I don't look like a football coach, even though my dad is not an NFL executive or an NFL coach, even though I don't have a name where I walk in the room and people immediately recognize me, like if you're around me during those times, like you recognize that, like, gosh dang it, this guy is just passing out the Chick-fil-A's, but he is like so serious about dominating that aspect of his job, that I think that was really the aspect that allowed me to create that trust with the players more so than anything I did in my playing career. Because quite honestly, my playing career wasn't that there wasn't a ton of accomplishments, and there wasn't that much to fall back on in terms of my playing career. So it was more what I was doing in the moment.
Yeah, work in silence, and eventually, good things will happen. That's how I see it. As honestly, that's especially like what I'm doing now. We have a like a local racetrack here in Massachusetts called Seekonk Speedway. I got an announcing job over there very recently, and you just see it. Whether it's the drivers that are putting in the work, or it's the kids, the guys in the concession stand, flipping burgers, grilling dogs, whatever. Everyone's putting in the work, and that doesn't go unnoticed. You know what I mean? Great management. We're always, they're always, hey, thank you for going the extra mile. And like it man, I said, like, here's $100 bonus. No. But like it doesn't go unnoticed. I think that's what it's big. It is.
And I think you guys can tell too, right? Like you can tell the difference between somebody who just loves being a part of that atmosphere or wants to be a part of that versus people that are just kind of there.
Yep.
And maybe don't carry that same passion or that attitude.
So speaking of passions and attitudes, you try to preach those through the good ones, at least through your podcast hosting and your motivational speaking. So when you were in, like college, did you ever see yourself really diving into like podcasting or like any kind of broadcasting at all?
Yeah, it's honestly not at all. And I can remember, I'm going to date myself here. Okay. Right. So I was in high school, or I was a senior in high school in 2001. And I remember, obviously I was playing football, but I had a couple of classmates that were doing the like announcing for the game on the internet, right? Like, so it was on broadcast.com. Which is like, we're talking early days of the internet, right? Like this is pre-YouTube, this is pre-podcasting, anything. Yeah. And I can remember like listening back each week at like my two friends that would call the game, and it just seemed like so cool, right? Like they're sitting there, they would always be like, oh, that's Evan Burke with the tackle. I think that's his 30th tackle of the game, just kind of like having fun with it. And I remember hearing that and being like, wow, that's so neat. But like, obviously I didn't get a chance to do that. It's very different now than it was, 20 years ago. Oh, yeah. Right now, it's so easy to pick up your phone and literally like, you can put a podcast on Anchor. You could just film yourself and put it on social media or create a YouTube video in 5 minutes. That was not even something I like could fathom 20 years ago. And obviously I started very young as a coach. I was 21 years old when I kind of like got started coaching. So it was never anything I was like considering creating media. And just because I'm nearly 40, I'm not necessarily the most prolific social media presence. But I will say that, over the last 5 years or so, it has become something that I've thought about. And, I think a lot of it is conversations I would probably be having anyway in terms of my podcast. Yeah. Because I always gravitated towards having like very deep conversations with the people that I was close to and coaching about leadership, about their experiences. A couple of my good friends either coached or played for the Patriots early in the Bill Belichick era. And so I have a friend that like is one of my closest friends to this day, but like our friendship was literally built on like going out to breakfast and like picking this person's brain on, hey, what was Bill Belichick like that first year that you were there? Because he was like there in year one, right, through the first through the third Super Bowl. And so just asking him about like how that program was built. Like, what was Tom Brady like before he was Tom Brady?
Yeah.
Like, what was the locker room like when Lawyer Malloy got cut? All of these little things that, like, we hear stories and stuff, but like when you're a coach and you're in that, you want to hear like the specific details of, oh, that happened because there was a fight over like who could play what music in the locker room. And so Bill Belichick made an example out of literally the captain of the team. Wow, that's some like heavy stuff. You don't realize that. You just read that, oh yeah, lawyers pissed at Bill because he cut him. And like, no, there's a deeper cultural thing that was going on that as a player, you don't think about. You just get a big ego. And but as a coach, you're thinking about the entirety of the picture. So all that to say is like, those are the conversations I nerd out on and love to kind of dig deep. And that was kind of the reason I started the podcast. Is these were conversations I enjoyed, and I figured other people would enjoy them too. And as you mentioned, kind of like the speaking kind of came as an evolution of the work I was doing in football. I've always viewed football, even though yes, it's specific to football, but it's always about developing people. You know, you're developing a person from a high school player to a college player. You're developing them from a red shirt or a backup to a starter. You're developing them from a starter to a all conference player. And so everything that I've always done has been about developing people, as players. And I view kind of like the podcasting is educating on that front, and the same with the motivational speaking.
What would you say you like the most about motivational speaking? Like, what about it just draws you to it?
Well, I think number one, if you can't tell, I'm perfectly comfortable filling a room of dead silence
Yeah.
and like enjoy the aspect of talking. So I think like it's a good alignment with my strengths. There is something about delivering a message in front of a crowd and kind of like feeling that energy that you get when you're telling a story that delivers a message, or an intriguing story that people haven't heard before. I love that. And I've always really thought that I've always personally learned through kind of like relating things to sports stories. So when we're talking about how do you build a winning organization, like it can be corporate, but the first thing I think of is Nick Saban at Alabama, or Greg Popovich at San Antonio, or Bill
Great answer, Nick
Belichick.
Saban in Alabama. Just saying.
Yeah.
Continue.
Or Bill Belichick with the Patriots, right? And I think that like any sports fan would kind of, you know, make these parallels. And I've always enjoyed that aspect of it, is kind of like telling these relatable stories to some ideas that might be slightly more complex, but kind of break across boundaries, right? Like when we're talking about building a winning culture, it doesn't matter whether it's a sports team or a corporate organization. It's all groups of individuals coming together to achieve a common goal. And so I think like those are the things that I enjoy most about it. And quite honestly, like in terms of what I perceive my strengths to be, it is being in front of an audience. It is being a storyteller. So whether I'm on my podcast or I'm in front of a group of audience, that's kind of me at my best, so to speak, where I have everybody's attention. I'm able to deliver a message, hopefully in a concise way. I still have areas that I need to work on as well, but I do enjoy that aspect of kind of like sharing those messages, sharing the stories from my career, and also like the lessons learned along the way.
So one last thing. So when you do your motivational speeches, or like any other time you just have like somebody on the podcast, one-on-one, whatever you're talking about, what would you say is the number one thing you want them to take away from what you're talking about in your speech?
Well, I think it depends on the audience, and I think it depends too on kind of like what the message is going to be. You know, I have a school I'm working with, a college, where I'm doing a professional development series with them. So that series is going to be all about how do you network? How do you interview? How do you go and pursue the job of your dreams? Because I'm somebody that was able to go from 4th grade football to the NFL in 6 years.
Oh my God.
So a very uncommonly short period of time to access the highest levels of football when starting at the bottom. And so like that message is not only going to be to pursue your dreams and not put limits on yourself, but it's also going to be very practical in sharing my real life emails, my real life failures, my real life networking success stories with them. Another college that I'm going to be speaking to in September, it's going to be a completely different message. It's going to be very motivational. It's going to be about how I went from 4th grade football to the NFL in 6 years, and like more around the attitude, right? I mentioned the dominate today attitude to you guys earlier. So that message will be very motivational in terms of how do you attack every day. It's not about getting to the NFL. It's about getting a small win today. In dominating today. So it really just depends. I think with my podcast, a lot of times the message is more to share the lessons of the guest. And I do a lot of research for those interviews. So I kind of know what I want to learn. So it's kind of you're learning with me through that guest. And I try not to do like kind of like the broad questions that everybody asks. It's kind of like I was sharing earlier. Like, I want to know what was the fight that led to Lawyer Malloy getting cut. I don't want to know about like, we know that they went on to win the Super Bowl, but I want to know like what precipitated that and kind of like the aftermath of that. So it's really like sharing the lessons of the people that I'm interviewing. And then obviously when I'm on stage, it's sharing my lessons in addition to like the stories that I think relate all the topics that are in play. So it really just kind of depends. And I'm kind of, I enjoy being in kind of different buckets where it's professional development one week, it's motivational the next week, it's sharing somebody's story on the podcast. I've always been energized by different environments and different people. And I kind of enjoy that aspect of, consulting with different companies and speaking to different groups.
The Highest Level with Evan Burke is available Apple, Spotify, Google. I've listened to it. It's pretty good. Check it out. One of the top 5 sports leadership podcasts, according to FeedSpot. Evan's also an author. Finding Intangibles by Evan Burke. I want to talk about it, but we have 1:54 left, according to my thing. So it's on Amazon. Check it out. I mean, if he could speak, I'm sure, mouth, pen, I'm going to assume it, not going to assume, we know how it's what we assume. I'm going to imagine it's a great read. So check it out, excuse me, if you get a chance. So that's going to do it for us on this edition of the Sports Saga podcast. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, everything, follow us on social media, Linktree in the description below. Check it out. For Evan Burke and Keegan Hamlet, Brady Kudo here, signing off, saying thank you. And remember, dominate today.